Story 1. Focusing on all the things they aren't giving you instead of all the things they do give you. I am in a happy marriage, but I did used to do this. I became happier, and our marriage became stronger when I stopped. Story 2. Accommodation to avoid any conflict. At the time, I was working through a lot of childhood trauma, and I didn't know better, but now I do. I lost my identity trying endlessly to please him so he wouldn't abandon me, but he was going to do that anyway. You can't and shouldn't have to earn love from people, and them betraying and disrespecting you is a cue to exit, not a sign to try harder. Story 3. Not immediately stopping the wedding when he said, "Once we're married, the mask comes off." I stupidly assumed it was a joke. Story 4. Lack of communication. He never told me about what he thought or how he feels about our relationship. Those feelings just compounded over time until he ultimately called it quits. I wish he had talked to me. We could have figured it out together. I was always in the dark and did not even see the breakup coming. It hurts, but I think it was just meant to be. Communicate with your partner. Be transparent. It helps both parties. Story 5. Took a nap one day. She thought I was cheating. A big blow-up argument ensued. Then I found out she was cheating on me. Story 6. Trying to communicate with someone who couldn't receive or recognize healthy communication, and then not ending things as soon as he turned resentful and cold towards me, but foolishly thinking that somehow we could communicate as to why he was suddenly treating me poorly. Even if you create a safe space for communication, if the other person isn't willing to do so, it's pointless. It's silly now to think that I ruined the relationship for being open and transparent. Story 7. Oversharing. I know that with your partner, you should be able to talk about everything, but sometimes I should keep my mouth shut. Story 8. Getting too comfortable with doing the bare minimum. Take her on dates and buy her flowers before you wish you could again. Story 9. Staying quiet, waiting for the appropriate time to communicate, created an unnecessary stressful environment that could have been avoided by just talking it through immediately. I thought I was doing the right thing by waiting for a better time. Story 10. Doing too much and getting nothing in return. I did this grown man's laundry, cooked, cleaned, and bathed the animals. He did nothing except cheat on me. When I asked why he didn't leave because clearly he didn't love me, he said, "I just loved having someone to come home to. Now, I'm happily married, and we just had our daughter." He still stalks me on social media, I'm sure, because he had 1,000,000 burner accounts, and I couldn't possibly remember the names for all of them to block them. Story 11. In my last relationship, I was with someone who had an addiction. Since I had tried light drugs before, the whole relationship brought me down. When I got out of that relationship and met someone new who was super nice and decent, I messed things up by telling him about my past drug use up front. He made it clear that he didn't approve of it. I told him I would stop and that I wouldn't let something silly like that ruin a good relationship. After 3 months of being together, he wanted some space to figure out how to proceed because of his stressful job, frequent travel, and recent divorce. I gave him the space, but then I slipped back into drug use myself. Long story short, I lost a great man because of drugs. Story 12. Putting up with things but complaining about them instead of running from them, for example, red flags, is because you want a relationship to work. Instead of realizing this person is not suitable for you and leaving. But safe to say that was a very long time ago and I've moved on. If you're having to ask for normal human decency but think it's just because they are a bit blind, but you'll help them see, get out and seek therapy. Could be because you went through something before this. Story 13. He told us we shouldn't talk to our individual friends about our relationship issues because they will always take our side. 3 days before our breakup, he talked to 2 friends about our relationship issues and yes, they took his side. Meanwhile, I had been telling my friends everything was fine with us when it wasn't, and looking back, if I had spoken to friends about it, I would have had the strength to break things off a lot sooner. Story 14. Not spending quality time together. Those were the times when I was so drained by my job that I didn't even have the energy to do my skincare. All I wanted to do was sleep after a very tiring day. I'm a sleepyhead, by the way. We rarely met each other. I feel bad every time I wasn't able to meet him. If she wants to, she will, is easier said than done. Until one day he fell out of love. Story 15. She expected me to know why she was mad at me without communicating to me at all about what was bothering her. I'm completely open to correcting reasonable things that bother a partner, but I can't do that if you don't tell me what it is. I broke up with her after she was all upset and telling me I should know exactly why she's mad for 2 days. Eventually, she relented and told me she was mad that I watched a new episode of a show we normally watch together, which granted I did do, but that was the final straw in the no communication issues we had. Story 16. Trying to do everything I could to make him more comfortable, to unhealthy extents. He had a short fuse, so I often ignored my own wants and needs in order to not stir the pot. This included not directly telling him when he overstepped boundaries as to not hurt his ego and risk him getting pouty. It meant not having a talk about what I wanted and needed in bed because he had expressed exasperation when what he tried wasn't working for me, and I didn't want to further hurt his ego. It included walking on eggshells when he struggled with his mental health. It included doing everything his way, or trying to at the very least, which resulted in an unbalanced relationship and me feeling like I wasn't an equal, which was actually one of the reasons for the eventual breakup. Story 17. Lack of communication from fear of rejection pent up a lot of resentment and hurt, and ultimately led to the breakup. I regret leaving. Story 18. I'm going to say the unpopular thing and say that I didn't make a mistake. While I can be honest enough to admit that I am not perfect and I did plenty of things wrong, I was truly the only one who actively worked on the relationship or ever seemed to care what it looked or felt like for us. I wanted us to check in with one another, share our goals and plans, communicate. He wanted us to be like roommates. He wanted me to be quiet and take care of things at home while he took care of things outside of home. If I spoke with him about any detail that was not specifically important in his opinion, he wasn't interested in listening at all. He regularly spent as much time alone and in his room as possible. I can honestly say that I passed years of my life with someone who could not even have a regular conversation with me. After 13 years, I don't believe that man knew a single thing about me, and he actively chose to not know. Arguably, that could be a common mistake that he made that could be the answer to the question, but it's even more common than that. He kept a physical, verbal, and emotional distance from me, and instead would cheat on me. It's really sad how often cheating is the answer. Story 19. I thought that following my partner around the world would give me at least some say in when we went home or where we went next. Turns out I was wrong. After turning my life upside down multiple times, stopping my career in its tracks, and leaving me in a place I didn't want to be, she booked travel to her next destination without any discussion and said, "You can come with me if you want." I said no more, charted my own path, and that was the last time I saw her. Story 20. I was a if they want me to know, they'll tell me person married to an if they care about me, they'd ask person. Story 21. Listening to people who were like, you should date around as much as possible while you're young. Don't waste your young and college years in a relationship. While I totally agree with this for the most part, sometimes the good ones are already there. Story 22. Getting married before I had embraced my true sexuality was challenging because it conflicted with the conservative values I was raised with. I was lying to myself and therefore unintentionally lying to my partner. Another mistake was falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy multiple times between the first sign of incompatibility and the most recent moment of backing out of a divorce. And deciding to have a child to fix things was also a mistake. Story 23. Choose whom you let into your life carefully. Even people who initially have good intentions can end up taking a lot away from you. Even losing something as simple and intangible as your inner peace can end up being a much longer-term thing than initially occurs to us. Story 24. I was so confident that he would not cheat, and I trusted him so much. It was not a good idea. I got played very badly. Story 25. Constantly asking for the bare minimum can make you feel terrible for asking and make them feel terrible because they think you're nagging them. The cannot be bothered attitude is really unattractive, and they aren't your person. Just walk away and have peace for yourself. Story 26. I feel like a lot of the posts I am seeing are just issues with communication between couples. This just goes to show how important it is. Story 27. I gave up when he did, and I kind of wish that I hadn't. I know that once someone has thrown in the towel, It's highly unlikely that everything will magically go back to how it was. But I regret that I didn't fight harder for us. Story 28. I've tanked a lot of relationships by thinking everything needed to be fixed. I almost did it in the one I am in. He's in a bad mood, he's being snappy with me, we need to fix this. I need to sit down and have a heart-to-heart. I need to communicate that he's hurting my feelings right now. I'm overly therapized and really thought this was the best way to handle everything. My current significant other and I went through a lot of therapy apart and together, ironically, to work on this because with him, this is what happens. He gets angry and stews and will never bring the thing up to me until I coax it out of him. The suggested way to handle this was, surprisingly, less communication. I feel like we're in a better place when he can be acting like a total reactive jerk and instead of being like, have I upset you? I must have because you're treating me really weirdly and you're in an awful mood. I just want to get to the bottom of this. I can be like, your vibe is positively awful, you need to take a nap or something. If I did something to upset you that's making you act like this, I'll be open to talk about it later today. But right now I think we're both just annoyed. I'm gonna go do the rest of my day alone. I hope you feel better. Then I get home and it's 50-50. Yeah, I'm sorry, you did this thing last week that really upset me and I've taken time to think about how I want to address it calmly. And yeah, I have no idea what that was about. I think I didn't get enough breakfast and it made me moody. I'm glad you had a good day after that. But either way, we're both totally calm by the time we talk about it. Story 29. I think it was because I was too afraid to talk about some issues we may or may not have, just because I was afraid of the possibility of breaking up. And guess what? She broke up. I became too comfortable, I think. But on the other hand, she could have communicated about the problems so we could solve them together. But she was too afraid of hurting me. But it ended up hurting me more. But maybe it's too soon to know exactly, since it was 2 weeks ago she ended things. Story 30. Told her the truth about me being bisexual, and she always held it against me. But my daughter came out as pansexual, and she didn't bat an eye. Story 31. My last relationship was over 12 years ago. Honestly, it ended because I lost an unborn daughter. Since then, I haven't been hugged or kissed. I don't exactly know how to get back into the dating scene, or even if I really care enough to try again. Story 32. Covert contracts are premeditated resentment. I was a poor communicator and he was very controlling. I am generally avoidant and he is generally enmeshed. I did not think to say, I need a half hour to decompress alone after work, so I can show up to our together time more positively since I spend 8 hours managing people. He worked alone from home, just researching cryptocurrency for a bit and cleaning his downstairs Airbnb if needed. So when I got home, he was like a puppy, asking what we were going to make for dinner together and what we were going to do for fun. I did not think to say, I am exhausted after work and I feel like since you work shorter hours and are home all day, you can make dinner most nights since I also could literally just eat a girl dinner, 2 pickles and some cashews and be fine with it. But to him, making dinner together was our quality time. Eventually, our qualms would come up in fights, but we did not really resolve much. We just grew disrespectful and resentful and it came out in weird ways. I learned a lot from it, but there are a few scars that I have brought to other relationships. Getting better at voicing my concerns, though. Story 33. Expectations. I expected him to care as I did, be honest with me, make time for us to spend together, actually like me, have the same level of respect for me that I gave to him, be a decent person, and not use his children and other family members to support his lies. Expectations are what ruined my experience with that man. Story 34. Not my mistake, but refusing to acknowledge when you're wrong, either it's out of pure pride or whatever else. Just admit when you're wrong and apologize. Trust me, it makes everything much easier in any kind of relationship. Story 35. I once made the mistake of assuming my partner could read my mind. I kept my feelings bottled up, thinking they would somehow understand what I needed without me having to say it outright. Eventually, this led to misunderstandings and tension in our relationship. I learned the hard way that clear communication is essential in any relationship. Story 36. Mistaking a relationship for competition can be very subtle. Where would you be without me? I told you so. I was right. We play it off as sarcastic teasing, but when winning becomes a source of joy, disagreement, and constructive criticism can seem like an offense. Story 37. Believing that anyone who was nicer to me than my parents had been was a nice person. Related, believing that any workplace which was less toxic than kindergarten through 12th grade was a good place to work. Story 38. Asking my best friend of 15 years if she thought her 6-year-old son, my godson, had been sexually abused due to him grabbing my crotch, breast, and drawing a visually correct penis on paper in front of me. When I asked her if she thought this was normal behavior, she got enraged at me and has not spoken to me since. Story 39. Letting a stranger move in was a mistake. He used all our gear, including clothes, bikes, and so on. This situation had us arguing daily and even led to him pawning things at the local pawn shop. My significant other blamed me for giving the guy a bed for a few nights, which unfortunately turned into a few months. Story 40. Not a romantic relationship, but a friendship. I just made the mistake of thinking a relationship online equates to something similar in person. Lessons were learned. Story 41. Going along to get along essentially means not communicating wants and needs effectively. Not taking the time to check in with each other and actually hear what the other person has to say about how they think, and more importantly, feel about things, especially big decisions. Not everything needs to be a long, drawn-out conversation, but neither partner should feel like they're unable to share their side or perspective on a matter. It only leads to assumptions, resentments, and hurt. Edited to add. Patience, respect, and giving each other grace for being a flawed human that will sometimes mess up are also essential to success in relationships.